All right, if you grow green beans, you are going to probably need this video, because if you grow green beans, you know you will always find that bean you miss that ends up looking like that. And I can all of our green beans, and I love to do that, but I always miss one or two or more than that, and I end up needing to make pickled beans. And if you love pickled beans, dill pickles, these are great for snacking on. And I only just found out that they're also what is always served with a Bloody Mary, which I do not love. I don't think tomato and vodka goes together, but if you do, this would be the perfect thing to make to add to your Bloody Marys that you serve, I guess. So we're going to walk through how to do it. If you stick around, I'll show you a trick, because usually you're going to find occasionally in your picking beans every day, you're going to find a few like this, but you can't, you're not going to have enough to can unless you do it on purpose and wait. If you want to pick them and leave them in the fridge until you have enough to can a few like this, and you want them to stay that crisp in the fridge for days, I have a little trick I'll show you about in a little bit. I have a big pot of water right here boiling. This is going to be water bath canning. So this is my canning pot, but we're not going to be using it as a pressure canner. We're just going to be using it as a water bath. And it has a little tray down in the bottom that the jars will sit on. So you're going to use these. I'm using wide mouth pints. I like this because they're easy to get into to get a pickle out of. I have some water boiling here that we're going to blanch these beans really quickly in. We're going to blanch them for about 3 minutes in boiling water and then dunk them in ice water for 2 minutes and then drain them. So I'm going to get that started. Meanwhile, this is heating up because we're going to put our jars in this pot. And on the back here, I have my brine that is going to be what goes in the jars. And that is 2.5 cups of water, 3.5 cups of white vinegar, and we're going to add 2 tablespoons of pickling salt, which I will just add now, and that is warming up on the back of the stove. And you will also need, if you're canning, you're going to use your jars, you're going to use your reusable ring and your not reusable caps. And I'll show you a little trick about these, because I always, I put these in warm water while I'm getting everything ready. I put these in warm water just to like soften the sealing compound up a little bit. It's just an old habit. I don't think you even need to do it anymore, but I do. And I will show you a trick about that that will save you burnt fingers and some minor screaming later on in your kitchen. So we'll put those aside until later. Some of the other tools you're going to need, you don't need really any special tools for this. I have literally water bath canned in a big pot with this, just fold a towel and put it in the bottom to keep the jars off the bottom. If they'll fit and they'll be covered by 2 inches of water, you can use whatever pot you have. I use one of these to get the beans out of the boiling water. You will need a jar lifter to get them out of the hot water when they come out, to get the caps out of the boiling water. Well, it's not boiling. Hot water. To get the caps out of the hot water, this is a little magnet, and it just, so you can get them out of the water to put them on the jars. And a bubble freer, or as I like to call it, a butter knife, because you don't need to buy a special tool for this. You're just going to use it to loosen up the airspace between the beans once they're in the jar. And a measuring tape, and I'll explain to you what you're going to do with that in a little bit. You will also need peppercorns, because I'm going to put 3, if you can see those, 3 whole fresh peppercorns in the bottom of each jar. I picked garlic from the garden, so we're going to put a clove of garlic peeled in each jar. And fresh dill, although I just picked this, and if you've watched our garden videos, you know that our garden this year is basically non-existent. It's in the middle of a renovation. So I have what grew wild in my garden, and this is the pathetic little small dills that are fresh out there, and those are about 1/4 of the size of the dill that I grow, that I actually plant from seed every year. So you're supposed to put 1 of these in each jar. This is not even close to enough. So I picked them all, and that's all I got. That may be enough. I probably have 4 jars. I have 3 or 4 pints here. I'm going to guess maybe 4. This I will divide between my jars, but a little trick with dill when you're pickling, any dill pickling scenario that you're getting into that calls for fresh dill, depending on where you're at or what time of year it is, or if you're growing it or you're trying to find it at a market and you can't find fresh dill, I just get bulk dill seed. Looks like this. And you would use a teaspoon of this instead of 1 fresh head. So you can do a teaspoon of dill seed if you can't. It's just like a lazy way to do it. If you can't track down fresh dill and you want to make pickles really quick Instead of going out and trying to find fresh dill, just throw in a teaspoon of dill seed and you're going to get the same effect. One thing to point out, since I'm using pints and not quarts, if you're using quarts, you wouldn't need to worry about this. And you might, if you have long beans, you could put these in quarts, I guess, like you do dill pickles. I don't know. We just do them in this because we like a smaller amount. But you're going to put that in that jar. And that is, as you can see, just about a little longer than the jar. And you want a 1-inch headspace in this jar. So instead of wasting that much bean, you know, like I would need to trim off that much of that bean, I will just break these in half and put them in that way. If they're long enough, if you luck out and you pick a bean that's that long, you can, you know, push that down in there and kind of tuck it down in so you're going to hit that 1-inch headspace. If you don't, some of these bigger, longer ones, I just don't want to waste that extra inch off of every bean. So I'll just break those in half and they'll be half as long. See, like just a little bit too long. So I could do these in quarts. We don't eat them fast enough, honestly. So I'd rather cut them in half and have a smaller jar. That's just a little old timer hack. So while I'm trimming these and putting these, getting these ready to go in the jars, let me also just say, for people that are wanting to can, if you're wanting to can like for a fair, or you want to do something where it's on display, definitely you would want to shoot for getting everything like exactly the same size, exactly the same length, and put them in the jar so they're all like facing the same direction, all lined up perfectly. And you can, you know, do wax beans and green beans and alternate the color. But if you're wanting this for a display for like a judged competition, then this, I have learned over the years, just whatever works to get it on the shelf the fastest. And it looks great either way to me. So I'm about what's the quickest way to get the job done. If you want it for display, for a fair, a competition, or if you just are perfectionist enough that you want to open your cabinet and go, oh, everything's beautiful and identically the same, then take the extra time, line everything up, trim it, measure it, you know, make sure that it's going to look perfect, and then it will look perfect. It'll be amazing. I just don't do that. Sorry, it still tastes good. Okay, so I'm just adding these to water that's almost boiling, and we're going to get it up to a boil and just blanch those for 3 minutes, and then take them out, and we're going to put some ice in this bowl and blanch and cool them off out of the boiling water into ice water for 2 minutes, and then drain them. And back here I have my brine. We're going to warm that up to a boil, and then once that is up to a boil, we can go ahead and turn it down and just keep it warm until we're ready to pour that over the beans in the jars. While we're waiting for the beans to come up to a boil, I'll show you a little trick. If you keep your lids in warm water while you're waiting to can, they come stacked like this in the box, and you're going to use a magnet to get them out of the warm water. If you use this trick, you will lessen the chance of burning your hand on the hot water. When you pick these up with a magnet, there's a good chance that you may grab two, like that. And oftentimes, see how they're kind of puzzle stacked together, and they're hard to get apart. And when you have a little water between there, you get a little kind of a seal happens, and then you have to try and get them apart, and a little burst of hot water will run down your hand and make you scream. So what I have learned over the years, if you're not doing hot water, which I don't know if you even need to anymore, but I do, if you're going to, I put them in the water, alternating sides. Put one face down and one face up, and one face down and one face up. And then when you go to pull them with a magnet, you're just going to for sure get one, and they won't be stuck together, and you will not burn your fingers. So those are going to go in the water while we wait. I am going to guess that this is only going to make 3 pints. I'm warming up 4 lids. I usually do 1 extra lid just in case. And again, I think these newer lids, I don't see anywhere anymore that you're supposed to warm them up. So do that or not. It's just a very old habit that I have not gotten rid of. All right, for 3 minutes in blanch water. So bring it up to a boil, and then just bring it down to low and let them simmer for 3 minutes. And we're going to put these beans in ice water to basically stop the cooking process. And then these will sit in here for 2 minutes, and then we are ready to put them in jars as soon as you want to make sure they're not too hot to touch. So that's also why I like the ice water, but it's really to just stop so the cooking process stops. So they have blanched and cooled in the ice water, and the more I look at this, the more I'm guessing this might be more like 2 jars, and I will explain to you why. If you were going to make pickled beans, like when I can regular beans, I just get them in the jar. I kind of lightly pack them, but these I've learned, I've been canning for 32 years, and I have learned with pickled beans, it's okay to be a little violent with them. We are going to pack these in the jars as tight as we can fit them without destroying the beans. So we are going to jam these in these jars. So what I'm going to do, I have my brine right here, is already hot and ready to go. I have divided that fresh dill we saw in the beginning. I'm hoping that if I get, I'll probably get 2 jars and probably a loosely packed jar. So you're going to see how a partial, this is a small batch canning. I've just divided the dill into kind of 3 equal amounts, which this is about the amount of 1 normal sized head of dill. We're going to put that in the bottom, put in a nice big, I like big cloves of garlic because I like a garlicky dill pickle. And I'm going to put in 1, 2, 3 peppercorns. So that's what's in the bottom of that jar. And then you're just going to take your beans, and because I cut some of these into smaller pieces, I'm not going to be able to get them to line up too nicely. But if you're doing nice, the same length beans, I'll try and start with that just to show you. And I think I'm going to put them, because you want to make sure you have a 1-inch headspace, and that is where the measuring tape will come in that we talked about. After 32 years, I finally learned measure your headspace. Once you put the liquid in and get everything situated, you want to measure it. Eyeballing it is not enough. A 1-inch, what you think is an inch, probably not an inch. And if you have too much water, especially, you will end up, especially in pressure canning, it will force the water out. It'll boil out of the jar, and it will mess up your canning, and it may make the jars not seal, because if the liquid is forced up out, you'll end up with bits of the food will get stuck under that lid, and you'll have no seal, because you need a clean seal here with no product, as it were, on that rim. So I'm just going to put in beans here while I'm talking. I'll probably fast forward this because this takes a bit of time to get this to all be packed in here, but we're going to go as fast as we can because video. And if you could see how I'm filming this, you would laugh so hard. My camera is being held up by a cookbook and a small decanter of olive oil under the cabinet. I don't have a fancy studio or a fancy kitchen. So as you can see, and these are actually usually when I end up picking beans that are too big and I end up pickling the beans, they can get quite a bit bigger than this. I picked these when they were big-ish, but not huge. So I'm packing them in. You want to pack them down in, like, I don't know if you can see that because, again, lighting, but it's dark. I'm sorry. I will show you this in better light let's get it packed. And I'll just turn the camera around and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. But basically pack them in until you can't fit any more in by, pushing pretty hard without breaking them or smashing them. And then if I have a little extra room, I'll put in some of the smaller, I told you I cut some in half. So I'll put those in some of these little smaller gaps on the side. But if you don't pack them in tight, even with them being blanched and going in the jar, sort of cooked, you'll end up with a jar that looks like it's half full, and it'll feel like wasted space. So I have learned over the years to pack them in as tight as you possibly can fit. Hear the squeak? Squeak them in there as tight as you can, and you'll be glad you did. And I'm guessing that this might be all this jar is going to hold. And I probably have room to do 1 more jar. So this is also small batch canning for the win. One more thing that you can do, I'm just starting a second jar. If you like spicy things, you can add, this is just basic crushed red pepper flakes. And I will add, you can do it to taste. I don't like things super spicy, and our family doesn't either. So I will probably, and they're really pretty because they'll float around in the jar once it's full. So you can put that in. You can put up to a teaspoon. I usually do a half a teaspoon just because, again, we're not a heavy hot things kind of family. But if you like hot things, you can make hot dill beans by adding as much as you want of the crushed red pepper. All right, as I guessed, I got 1 nice tightly packed jar and 2 jars that I just went ahead and did them looser. So you're going to see that. And so you'll see what a packed jar looks like versus a jar that is loosely kind of thrown together. All I'm going to do is take this hot brine and we're going to pour it over. And if you want, on these I don't do the funnel, but you can. There's a canning funnel that you can get. So normally you can buy a little set of like this and this. And the jar lifter is all you need for canning. And it seems like every set that I see out there in the world, it's got like 5 or 7 different things. I don't even know what those other things would be. I don't need them. You won't need them. I promise you'll be fine if you just get these 3 things. So we're filling, and you want to get up to a 1-inch headspace. So I'm going to measure these. I do have a few beans sticking up above that, and I'll probably just push them down in so they're in the water, in the brine. But we're going to cover these with 1 inch up to that mark where you think it's 1 inch, but then just humor me and take a measuring tape and measure them. But take your bubble freer, which is a knife, and you're just going to go down and kind of move things around a little bit, just to release any air that might be trapped in your canned product. So, and then if you need to, you can add more liquid if you find that you've released any air bubbles that are significant. So I always just take a measuring tape and literally just measure from the top of the jar down to the water line, and that is 1 inch. So, and if it's not, then you want to add a little bit of extra, and if it isn't, if it's too much, you can take a little spoon and just pull some out. So, and these jars almost look like there's a little line right at about the 1 inch mark, which is kind of handy. So if you can at least get to know where that is, you can fill to that point. And I'm just going to push the beans back down in that are sticking up above the brine, because that's just how I do it. We're going to insert a step here that I missed while I was filming this. Before you once you have added the beans and the brine to the jar, before you put the cap on, take a damp washcloth and just give it a quick wipe around that rim to make sure that this is clean before you put that cap on. And you take your little magnet, dip out of the hot water and grab a cap, and just set it on top like that. And then take one of your rings, and these do not need to be screwed on like so tight, just finger tight. It doesn't have to be, you're not trying to hold it on with the pressure of the strength of your arm. You're just holding it on so that it can develop that seal in the boiling water. So finger tight, that's all you're going to do. And this is not hard. This has taken longer to videotape than it's probably would have taken to just do the job. And then I have my pot of boiling water here, so I'll turn the camera around and show you the next steps. All right, this is where the jar lifter is going to come in handy. So one of the only 3 things you're going to need. And these are going in boiling. This water's been boiling for a little bit. And if you don't have enough water going to cover these 3, I have 3 going in. This, you can do up to 7 in here. What's nice about using a canning pot, if you're doing especially little like half pints, you could stack double layers of these jars in here with put a rack between them, and you can get double, as long as you can get the water level 1 inch or 2 above the jars. These are, I just measure it with this. They're that much. There is that much water above the jars. So I may add a little bit of hot water to this. And in fact, here's another little trick that I forgot to tell you. If you have hard water like we do, and it's super hard, when they come out of this boiling water, a lot of times you're going to find hard water buildup on the jars. If you don't want to deal with that, you can add just a splash of vinegar to the water in this pot. And then when the jars come out of this water, they won't have that film of white hard water deposit. So what I'm going to do, and this is lazy, but it has vinegar. This has got vinegar and water left in this little bit of brine that's left. And I need a little bit of water to top this up. I'm just going to pour it in and have that be my extra water. So cheat, kitchen cheat mode. So I'm going to use my probe thermometer. And for pickles, what's nice, and I have found this over the years, you don't have to have a hard boiling water bath for these to process. They need to be 185 degrees. So I'm going to turn on the thermometer, and we're at almost boiling now, so I can turn this down a little bit. We need this to stay at 180 to 185 for 35 minutes. So check your altitude. If you have different altitudes, will require different times. So don't go by mine, go by whatever your altitude is. I need 35 minutes at 180 to 185 in this pot. So I'm going to let that simmer for 35 minutes, and then we'll come back and take these out. So 35 minutes later, this has stayed right at about 185, just a little bit more than 185. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the water and let this sit for 5 minutes. And then we're going to pull these out and let them cool. And that is all there is to it. I'll be right back. And this is where the jar lifter comes in, because you've got hot water. These have sat in here for 5 minutes-ish to just kind of slightly cool down in the water. You're just going to pull it out. Make sure you don't bump that lid as you bring these out. Just grab it by the glass because that lid is warm and sealing, but it's not sealed yet. So you don't want to disturb that ring. So just carefully, we're going to take them all out and let them sit over here until they pop down, and you'll hear a little pop as they seal. Here you can see the difference. This is the one that we packed them in nice and tight, and you can see how nice and even those are. And then this is what you'll get if you pack them a little bit looser. And the one in the back, I don't like to move these a lot once they're sitting because I don't like to disturb the sealing process, but I'll move this one. And this one you can see is the one that has the pretty red pepper flakes in it. And you're going to hear little pops as these seal. And then once that, you'll see there is a little right there. You can see that. That is popped up. That means that lid is not sealed yet. And as they seal, you'll hear a really audible pop. It's really satisfying sound. If you can, you'll learn to know that sound. But as they seal, as they cool, you'll see that pop down, and then that will show you that that jar is sealed. And then as these sit, I will leave them undisturbed entirely on this little towel overnight. And then tomorrow I will come and write the date on the lid, and then these are ready to go in the cabinet. And I wouldn't serve them to eat right away. Usually pickles do best if you leave them for a few weeks before you crack them open and eat them. And we actually have enough for each year, so we won't probably be opening these until at least Christmas. And it's August, it's the end of August now. We probably won't open these until Christmas and or possibly clear into next year before we're enjoying these lovely beans. So I hope this inspires you to try your hand at pickled beans, and if you want to add them to a snack tray at the holidays, or if you want to stick them in a Bloody Mary, we just eat them on a snack plate with like crackers and cheese and different kinds of pickles. So, and back to the beginning when I said there's a trick to keeping them fresh. Remember that snap of how fresh they were after they'd been in the fridge for several days? I will post a link to the short video that explains how I do that right here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.